talk about some of the different things that each of my distinguished panelists are really working on to try and have an impact in this space. And hopefully we can provide some insight into some of the different things that are occurring out there, some of the lessons learned, and then really open it up to all of you so that we can dive into things. So we're not going to take any time to really introduce the panelists. I'm just going to let them jump into their work, and we'll have some follow-up questions at the end. I'm going to try to take as much time as possible for all of you. And so yeah, Zoe, why don't you get us going?
So good afternoon, everyone. Just by way of brief introduction onto how I sit within HSBC and why I've got an interest in water and why I'm speaking to you today. My role is Director of Climate Change Strategy in the Climate Change Centre of Excellence. Now, the Climate Change Centre of Excellence is a research function at HSBC. We work between group sustainability and global research and identify themes and trends in the climate space which will impact all of our climate society. So why I wanted to talk about the bigger picture on water is to look at the global challenges that we face. So climate change essentially makes resource stresses that we already have in our global economy worse. It acts as a threat multiplier on the constraints on energy, land and food. Water is the key way in which climate change manifests itself. So we'll see increased, essentially it speeds up the water cycle. Hotter temperatures result in increased evaporation, and that means more floods in some areas and more droughts in others. So essentially what we're looking at is an availability issue. And of course, availability matters on a localised basis. So while climate change itself is a global phenomenon, the impact as felt through the water cycle is very local. And one of the reasons why I'm here in Asia today is that we've identified that we think that India and China specifically are key regions which are particularly impacted by water and its localised stresses. Some of the areas that people may not think about in terms of how water transmits into other sectors, in terms of energy disruption, if you don't have enough water or if water is too hot, it impacts your ability for thermal power generation, and of course that has a knock-on effect on other industries and their productivity and their ability to operate. In particular for climate change in food, as temperatures increase above optimum levels for growing crops, that means that you may get diminished harvests, and of course that transmits through the global markets in terms of prices and the price mechanism, and we saw the effects of that last year. So the interlinkages between these factors are all too clear, and whilst the location of availability matters, it matters to such a degree that the philanthropic effort is key to generating the solutions that are required. So essentially, climate change creates pinch points. It transmits through the water cycle, and that impacts on livelihoods. That knock-on effect impacts economies and the competitiveness of all economies to operate. We did a piece of work called Water Scarcity, the Global Challenge, around 6 months ago. And we created a scoring mechanism to look at particularly the G20 countries, but also to think about vulnerability in other regions. And the key points that I wanted you to take away from this are that water availability has already declined dramatically in some countries. So we've seen 60% declines in water availability on a per capita basis for Saudi Arabia, Mexico, South Africa and India. So we've already got scarcity, and we've already got stress levels in India. We've got scarcity in South Korea, South Africa and Saudi Arabia. Why do we think this is particularly important in India? Well, India is is the country that has the biggest contribution to GDP from agriculture among G20 countries. So in India, agriculture contributes 17% 17% of the of GDP mix, and that compares with around 3 to 5% in other G20 countries. India also comprises 25% of world water withdrawals for agriculture. So as population grow and food demand increases, you can see that that's already a constraint going forward. China also has localised stress. We did another piece of work in conjunction with the Hong Kong office that looked at the water availability and power use, power generation mix going forward for China. And in the course of that study, we found that 47% of Chinese GDP is driven from water-stressed regions. So HSBC uses research as a core function to think about how capital flows might need to change going forward and where our customers might need funding and how we can make a difference. So we've identified water as a challenge, and on a day-to-day basis I'll talk to our institutional investors and how they might position their portfolios in relation to water risk. But we also think about how we can make a difference at a more localised level and in areas which may not have the same access to the capital markets that we all do sitting here today. So we've got a philanthropic programme. It's our flagship environmental project. HSBC focuses our philanthropic efforts and our community investment efforts on areas that we think are important for the business as a whole, which are environment and education. And in 2012, we launched a 5-year programme donating 100 million to WaterAid, WWF and Earthwatch to complete projects throughout the world in relation to water. So in WaterAid, we're aiming to supply water, to give access to 1.1 million people. We're hoping to provide sanitation to 1.9 million people in addition to that. And that's about raising awareness on hygiene, building facilities and improving livelihoods throughout Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, Ghana and Nigeria. We realise that we are not experts on the ground in these issues, such as access to water and sanitation, and that's why we think it's important for us to pair with NGOs that have a global reach and can implement the funds both on a direct basis and to productive use. WWF is all about protection and conservation, implementing practices and policies along rivers and freshwater resources. And Earthwatch is all about setting up freshwater research projects to over 20 cities. And we think that these drive benefits for both HSBC and its local communities. And we've already engaged employees across the world to tackle these water issues. So I think that's just given you a top-down overview of the Global Water Challenge. My role specifically is on the research side of that, but also given an idea of how a large organisation such as ourselves can really target and pinpoint some localised issues.
Yeah, no, great, thanks. And yeah, so we'll just turn it over. You know, we've started kind of with a macro trend and really what a larger organization can do in channeling support to different organizations, and I think this really fits in very well, Leon, with what the work that you're doing at VNA.
Hello, good afternoon everyone. I'm Lian Hock from VNA. I have no relation to Lian family because every time when I introduce myself, my first name is Lian Hock, so they thought that it's Lian A. And I have to correct it. No, my family name is Ko, so I have although I know Lawrence, but I am not related to him at all. Okay, what I'm going to let me start. Although I'm not going to introduce myself, if you want to know more, we can talk about it later on. But I thought I want to share with you the mission of what we do. I know this is a venture philanthropy forum, but actually our efforts are very much a philanthropic kind of work. Our mission really is about making water available to disadvantaged or poor community in Asia itself. And we do it in a very direct manner, meaning to say we have country officers in three country officers, and our guys actually went out all the way out to find out, to reach out to the community that don't have access to water, and that's what we do. And we try to do it in a manner that the outcome can be sustainable. And my purpose here today actually is to tell everyone that as an individual or as a small group, we can make a difference to people who are out there who have been neglected by the community at large. We can actually bring water to them, and it's not that difficult. Okay, our funding are mainly coming from the foundation. We do have corporate funding as well as local funding. Okay, although at this stage we are purely philanthropic driven, but I will share with you some of the programs that because of our success, because of what we are doing, we're hoping that in the future it can become some form of social enterprise. But I wouldn't use that term now, but that's the direction that we're heading. Okay. Well, I'll share with you a couple of programs that we are working on, and to give you a better idea. Okay, this is a program that we are running in Cambodia. Basically, there's a lake called Onglesa Lake in Cambodia. I'm sure most of you are aware of. More than 1 million people actually live on or around the lake itself. Now, there's this about 300,000 people living on the lake itself and on this kind of floating houses. So the water itself are actually fairly polluted, either by agriculture or by pollution from the people living on it. So this is the condition, the water conditions, and for many of those floating villages fairly far out from the shore, the only source of water is actually this. And for them to boil it actually is also costly, because it takes, some of these villages takes about 1 hour from the shore. So if you want to boil water, it's unlike the land. You could if you're poor, you could always go to pick up some firewood and boil the water, and you have clean water. But for these people, you still have to go out to the shore to actually pick up the water, pick up the wood. So there's an energy cost to actually boil water, unlike people who stays on the land. So what we have done, the initiative there was really to actually construct a water treatment plant. We actually draw the water directly from the river and then treat it to a level that is potable, and then bottle it into about 20 liters and sell it to the community in the regions, within the communities. So one water treatment plant will serve about a community of about 1,000 people. Now, the way we ensure that this can be sustainable is actually to, within the community itself, we identify a champion and then train them how to operate this water treatment plant, teach this person how to sell, how to price, and how to maintain this on an ongoing basis. Now, we have been doing this since 2010. So far we have completed about 5 of this, and this year we have decided to scale up to a much bigger scale. We intend to do about 11 in one province itself. Now, why do we want to do that? Because as we learn to implement these projects, we realize that there must be an end to what we are doing, and we can't solve the problem. So what we are having to do now in 2 directions. One, can we make the solution that we are doing so cost efficient that the local community can take it and do it on their own? So that's the first part. And to do that, we basically need to we try to scale it up and see how we can use the solutions that we have developed, to see whether this can be locally sourced and locally implemented to a level where the ecosystem is available within that community, that anyone in the village can take it up and implement. So that's the first aspect that we have tried. The second part that we are doing is more on the software aspect of it. That is, how do you actually run a water treatment plant, and how can it be sustainable on an ongoing basis? So this is something we are still working on. So we have a whole initiative plan to basically to gather all this water entrepreneurs together to actually share knowledge. So it's something that we are also working on. So as you can see, we start with a very small project in 1 or 2 villages, and then we are trying to bundle this together into a program. and then we can see how we can scale up in terms of resources, improve in terms of cost efficiency. Now, someone may ask, what is the impact here? I think to me, the impact is very obvious. You have drinking water. Okay, if you look at it, do you drink this or do you drink this water bottle? I think there's no need to go for impact assessment. I think it's quite obvious, right? Now, but beyond that, I think there are also some health benefits. I just cite a recent example when I was in one of the village. There was this lady that lived just beside a store that sells medicine for diarrhea. So I was asking her, so do you see any benefit from drinking water? She can't answer me, but she told me, say, nowadays I don't see a lot of people buying medicine for diarrhea. So I said, okay, I take it as we had done a good job. Okay. So again, I was discussing with a gentleman at the delegate, okay, how do you measure impact of this kind of projects? And it's really depends on what your donor wants. So sometimes it could cause the same cost that you need to implement a project to measure the outcome of this project. So it really depends on what you want as an individual donor. So for us, we are fortunate that our stakeholders are quite supportive of what we do, and they allow us term funding for a period of time. So we are possibly we can try from one village all the way to a big program. And in fact, recently we worked with a company. We have been doing this since 2010, so we weren't sure that whether our approach is the best approach. So we actually work with one multinational company who they also have their own water treatment system, and they got a group of about 5 employees who spend a couple of months in the location that we operate, and they go through the whole procedures that we do, and of course independently. And the result they came out was, yeah, your solution is still the better one compared to theirs, because on the maintenance basis, for the maintenance as well as the sustainability angle, we probably can outlast their solutions. So actually that gives us a lot of feedback into what we are doing. So this is the major program that we are doing. Now let me just go to another one. Now this is this type of problem that we've seen a lot, mainly in the North Asia, where there are frequent dry spells. There are also polluted water sources, and generally we've seen a lot like in the southern China, where there are no lack of water, but they only lack water infrastructure, like water sources may be a few kilometers away from their villages. And mind you, these are all villages that are far away from the town center or from where the government can reach them. So this is the community that we work in. So for example, these are the kind of storage that they have, which are very contaminated. And I have seen people actually drink directly from them. They don't even boil. So of course, to them, it's a way of life. So anyway, what we normally do over there again is about helping them to construct the local infrastructure. But more importantly, we try to work with them in terms of the software aspect of it. Mainly, how do you maintain the system? How do you set up a water association to collect a water tariff so that the system can be maintained over time? And we also try to conduct what we call health and hygiene training. It pass people knowledge like once you have water, you should wash your hands before you consume your food, so you can actually so that you can enjoy a better health. So I think that's the direct benefit of having water. Now, if I have time, maybe I just something different here. What happened is that in our previous program, we actually have the water entrepreneur that help us to drive the project so that it can be sustainable over time. In this project that we are currently doing, and focus mainly in China, where actually we try to leverage on a group of people. We call them village management training. These are actually young graduates employed by the provincial governments, and to be deployed in the villages is about up to 3 years. These are young graduates who are motivated to work in this village because this is a form of grassroots experience they can gather and allows them to become a priority to become a civil servant. So these people are very motivated, and we actually leverage on them to actually conduct our projects. So they will put up a proposal to us for us to submit, and then they will implement the projects, and then they'll see through for up to 2 years. So this is how we ensure the projects that we seek will be sustainable over time.
Great.
Okay. Now, I think that we enough. Otherwise,
I think we need to jump into
let me just share with you a couple of two factors of our projects. Okay, just a quick one. Basically, for our project to successful, I think there are two elements. One, I think, is a community ownership, and the second one, I think, is about capacity building. So these are important. And the second one, I can't emphasize enough, which is education as well as advocacy as part of the project. Okay, thank you. We can talk about you.
I think it's great. I mean, in talking with Leon before we started, I mean, they're working on a whole bunch of different initiatives in the water space. That not only we're focusing really on clean water delivery, and they're doing a lot of sanitation as well. And that's obviously a big part of the water equation, but we're going to focus most of this panel on clean water delivery. But really coming from a single source, and how much that can be done with a very concerted effort of working with local groups and working with governments in a very, I guess you could say, organized way to make sure that sustainability of the projects lasts in the long term. But what's been really interesting also to learn what Toshi's work is how do you actually bring in a whole bunch of different funders into different projects with different partners. So.
Thank you. My name is Toshi Nakamura. I'm actually a recovering UN worker. I used to work for the UN and beginning to think that why, despite this large amount of money going to the developing country, and so many cars that you see and so many UN workers that you see in town, why there's not much the change on ordinary people's lives?